And welcome back to Comics in 5 Minutes. I'm your ever-loving host, Shorty. And today, with quite good timing, I'm going to be reviewing Heart Eyes. This one from Vault Comics. And the reason it's fairly good timing is I've been concerned a little bit recently that I'm reviewing a lot of stuff which I love. And I don't want people to think that I only review things that I love. Every once in a while, I do read something so bad that I just don't finish it because it's so unconscionably terrible. And I'm certainly not going to review something that I couldn't even get through. I'll occasionally mention them in another video. I do read things that don't necessarily 100% land for me. I'm usually as honest as I can to say if something is technically good but maybe not be my cup of tea. And this one, it feels like it's a good time because it's also from Vault Comics. I have been loquacious in my praise for Vault Comics recently, specifically Barbaric, which is a fantastic comic. You can read that right now. This one I wanted to like more than I did, and I think unfortunately it kind of fell at a point where I just finished reading something quite similar, which did something really interesting with the story ideas, which is Human Remains, which is monsters turn up seemingly from out of nowhere, at least without any real explanation, are attracted to human emotion and absolutely obliterate human beings. And the story is about how we cope with that, how we understand it, and stories of grief and anger and loss and all manner of things tied in with it. Heart Eyes is mostly a story about two kids falling in love, hence Heart Eyes. I like that. But it's also a whole bunch of monsters have turned up seemingly out of nowhere, and are attacking and obliterating humans, and there's certainly some kind of emotional thing to it. There's a bit of a twist at the end, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, straight off, it was a little bit disappointing because you have this great start of somebody recording an event on a phone, or clearly some kind of influencer, and these monsters turn up and they look spectacular, but then most of the story is set years after the fact with no real monsters, and it's just people not really trusting other people, and very much a story of human survival in a post-apocalyptic world. Again, something which has been done a few times, and it's not like the most interesting story for me, and it's also not the most interesting story to read in a comic book sometimes. I know The Walking Dead did it for like years, where you basically have the zombie apocalypse as just a story facet. What it's mostly about is the terrible things human beings do to each other in the name of survival and what they can justify morally in terms of the greater good. And that's fine, but I kind of wanted a zombie story. And in this, I kind of wanted a big monster story. It's what I was hoping for. I'd read descriptions of being like big OTT eldritch horror kind of stuff. And yeah, when you see the monsters, they are spectacular. I do not want to take anything away from the quite wonderful sequences you get where these things turn up. It is brilliant. But even that, it doesn't happen very often. And by the time they come around at the end, there's also a certain kind of sense that even the artwork wasn't quite working for me the way I thought it would. The actual line work and the coloring and the shading is all great in and of itself, but the tendency to use color washers for a different like palette for each frame, and sometimes that works effectively. Sometimes it is a sudden unexpected bout of violence and it suddenly pulls into a really deep, vibrant red. There's a really nice shot of somebody coming out underwater, and it's all really translucent, bluey green. It's lovely when it's doing something, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's just like they've put a color on, and it's just because it's slightly darker. And then there's others where it's like slightly hazy light, and it doesn't really add anything. It is just what it is. But using it as just a full wash doesn't really interest me in terms of what they could have done with colors for each individual character and a lot of other stuff. Not that the art is bad. I don't want anyone to think that. Like, I'm being a bit critical of this one. It is still a good comic book in and of itself. There is great shots of the city. The monsters look fantastic. The deprivation and the destruction that's been wrought over the world is laid out really quite effectively. There's even occasional little funny bits of like stuffed octopus turning up, which is just a nice little thing they have in there. But it never quite does more than what I expected it to. And yeah, going back to the story, it's the same kind of thing, even with characterization. Yes, I said it was a love story kind of, and it is. One of the main characters is, I've gone through some like childhood trauma. I'm not going to get too much detail on that one here. I've not put any content warnings up. And there's also, I think maybe slightly neurodivergent. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I'm neurotypical. I can't say I can spot it instantly, but there is something slightly, I don't want to say, it sounds like I'm going to be mean here, but it's slightly off about the character. It took me a while to realize what it was. And then when you realize it was a childhood trauma, and then you realize, okay, maybe this is an explanation of it. But all it really comes across as is odd without really much depth to it. Like, there's been an attempt made to do something which makes his character different and unique and unusual and stand out. And in the comic, it mainly comes across as she's not, people don't trust her because she seems odd. And me reading it, yeah, she just seems a bit odd. There's opportunities here to do bigger stories and tell more interesting things about characters and their backgrounds and why people behave the way they do. But instead of that, it just feels like a fairly normal human story that is bookended by giant monsters that I wish I could have seen more of. That's it for me for the week, though. I will be back on Tuesday. Until then, look after each other, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.